Hey, what's up? So today, I'm just gonna do a minor update on my Esper control deck for the modern format. I've been playing this deck for about, I want to say about a month and a half, almost 2 months, at several locals in my area. Um, and the turnout of my locals are generally around 8 to 16 players, so not the hugest turnout, but still a fairly decent sample size of, and you know, many different decks I've played against. Some pretty top tier decks or high tier decks, and again some pretty mid rangey in terms of tier. I would not consider Esper tier 2 or even tier 1, probably in the third tier or so, maybe even less. But I enjoy Esper, so um, made a couple of changes to the deck since the last one, and I'll kind of explain it. Some of my experiences playing this deck and some matchups and stuff like that, and so and the reason why I made some of those changes. Let's just go ahead and get started. So, in terms of my one mana lineup, not too much has changed. Still, I have the three um, prismatic ending. Could possibly bump this up to four. Uh, I do really like this card. It's still a really good card. Really good removal, very efficient. Answers practically everything. The only thing it doesn't really do well at is answering things that are obviously 4 mana or even 5 mana or anything between those ranges. Usually, this card has a bit of difficulties, but most of the cards in modern fairly um, low on the mana curve. So prismatic ending does a really good job at removing that. The only downside of it is its sorcery speed, so you can't really play this on your opponent's turn. Um, what I did with this deck is I made it mostly a draw goal deck now. After test playing it quite a bit, I found that my experiences doing sort of the draw goal style with this deck did was more consistent, I guess. And I had as I'll go through the deck, you'll see what I mean. And originally, I wanted to do more of a tap out style, but uh, I guess the me tapping out, not having mana up to counter spell sometimes, stuff like that, um, kind of. I wouldn't say backfire, but definitely made the deck a little bit less consistent. So I'll kind of explain my choices there. Still doing the 4 fatal pushes. I still really like fatal push as a efficient removal for the most part. Uh, Honestly, you could probably play maybe 3 of these or even just 2 fatal pushes rather than the full play set. But in my area, my local meta, there's quite a few, I guess, aggro deck. A lot of burn deck. Mono red was very popular. Um, and lures decks, stuff like that. As you'll see, my card choices it kind of skews towards dealing with low mana threats, and so if your meta is like control heavy or like big mana plays like Tron or Titan or something like that, obviously Fatal Push is not that great against those type of decks. But in my area, a Fatal Push is almost a must. Like everyone is just playing really low powerful creature like you have Tarmogoyf, you have Darcy, you have monkeys, you have um, Death Shadows, other Snapcasters, just very efficient low mana creatures that require some sort of answer immediately. And the reason why I chose to play the 4 fatal pushes because it's instant speed. There's a lot of times where my opponent will play something like a Swift Foot or Swift Spear, I guess. I forget the Prowess um, creature, and that demands an answer immediately. And obviously, if you have prismatic ending, it's a little it's too slow. It's not going to answer that. Where fatal pushes will save you. It will answer uh, those creatures. It also can answer let's say a Sentinel. Sentinel really hurts this deck because you're playing basically all spells, and you don't want to give your opponent too much draw, and they'll outvalue you. And so, getting rid of Sentinels, getting rid of just stuff like that is very important. And I think Fatal Push still really good removal for what it is, mana wise. Just one black is pretty good. It can also obviously hit 3 to 4 mana things too, more efficiently than say a Prismatic Ending. But yeah, I still think it's very powerful card, even though we do have the Prismatic Ending and some other form of removal. What I changed about this deck is, like I mentioned, I made it more of a draw go. So I end up taking out the Thought Seizes. What happened was during a lot of my games, well, not a lot of my games, but some of my games, I'll end up Thought Seizing. I'll end up taking too much damage, and in the meta where everything is kind of aggro, everything kind of uses the graveyard. Um, Thought Seizing wasn't as powerful as I wanted it to be. It was great that I knew, what was in my opponent's hand. Information was valuable, um, but unfortunately, they usually just, they have very low mana stuff in their hand. Kind of just, uh, you know, they're able to kind of cycle their hand pretty quickly, and so that information was kind of lost. I wasn't really hitting anything that was super valuable out of their hand with the Thought Seizes, so um, I ended up taking out the Thought Seizes and just playing the Ops instead. So what I like about the Ops and the cantrips here is it allowed me to get lands. So this deck, it's heavy blue, and so you really need to consistently get your blue mana sources up, and consistently draw your counter spells. And when you start to flood out, you need to, because we do play 24 lands. I was playing 25. I downed it to 24 because I was playing the Ops, and that seemed to work okay. In this deck, if you miss a land drop, it really does hurt. So you want to minimum get to that third land drop, and then from there, obviously you don't want to be seeing any more lands. After the fourth or fifth land, you don't want to be flooding out, because there's a high probability of this deck that you do flood out. So you want to avoid getting land stuck, and you also want to avoid flooding out, and so the Ops do help with that. And they combo well with Snapcasters. So I'm not playing any Sharknadoes. So Sharknadoes are pretty good, but you don't want to be cycling Sharknadoes for 2. That's kind of a waste. It's a pretty bad cycle. Um, and at 3 mana, making a 1/1 shark with and drawing a card is not as powerful as I want it to be, or flexible. I still like Snapcastering with this. So you Snapcaster with Op, it's essentially a 3 mana cycling a Sharknado. Um, Slightly better body, but Snapcaster is a little bit more versatile. But if you don't have, obviously Opt or good good cards in your graveyard, and Snapcaster is obviously a lot more weak than Shark is. But yeah, I've been liking the Opt. You can choose to play Consider, but the reason why I play Opt over Consider is there's a lot of cards I only play 2 ofs in this deck or something like that, and I don't exactly want to dump that to the grave. So that's why I'm playing Opt, so I can just put it back at the bottom of my deck, maybe draw it later. I don't really need to fill my graveyard as much as I do with, like, let's say my Grixis deck, where I want stuff in my graveyard. Yeah, that's why I'm just playing the instant speed. Gets you what you need. Yeah. Next off, just still 2 dams. You're gonna run into those decks where you're playing like Titans or Murktide or something big where you can't remove with Fatal Push or Prismatic. Elementals are very popular in this format, and so you want something to be able to deal with that. And I like Dam over Supreme Verdict because it's flexible. You can play it for 2 mana if you need to, or play it for the full overload. And there have been sometimes a bit of I guess relevance in the stopping the regeneration, because I played against Affinity, and this card was a blowout against them. I just cast them, overloaded, and they couldn't regenerate anything, and that was really good. So I still like 2 dams. I think 3 would be kind of cloggy, depending. But I think 2 is good because we are playing Snapcaster, so we can recycle this if we really needed to. So I don't think more than 2 is necessary in terms of a sweeper. Still 4 counter spells. We're playing draw go, so um, obviously the best counter spell for mana wise is counter spell. I wish we got memory lapse. I mean, memory lapse is definitely, I prefer memory lapse over counter spell for sure. In a lot of my games, especially when I was playing historic arena, when before memory lapse was banned. That definitely my favorite counter spell. Uh, for the mana value, or for being a 2 mana counter spell, memory lapse. But maybe one day we'll get that. Still the 4 snaps. Not much change here. They help us kind of close out the game, or slowly close out the game by just poking them with snap. Obviously, if your opponent's playing graveyard hate, hurts a little bit, but snap is, you can still play them for 2 mana and just whack stuff with it or block. Still a really good card. I wanted to try out Solitudes. I know those are pretty good, and I wanted to try out maybe like doing a Kahira with Solitude build. But unfortunately, Solitudes are a little too expensive right now. I think they're at minimum like $40 a piece. I mean, yeah, I say that as I have some pretty expensive cards in my deck. I just didn't feel like dropping on more Solitudes, or on Solitudes, just to try out. Where I know Snapcaster's been very handy in most of my decks that play blue. But yes, Solitudes are pretty good. I do like this deck against the elemental decks, for the most part, because most of their elementals don't really do anything against us. The only one that somewhat does anything is Fury, because Fury can snipe Planeswalker, but Solitude doesn't do anything. The green one kind of, I forgot, is Endurance. Yeah, Endurance can kind of mess with our graves, but like the only resource for you, only graveyard card that, sorry, let me rephrase that. The only card that uses the graveyard in our deck is Snapcaster. So if they endurance us, it's not such a huge deal. And I think Grief is not really played, and the blue one's not played, and yeah, so none of that really hurts us, which is really nice. But we also have a very hard time sometimes dealing with the elementals, because they are 5 mana, and 5 mana is just kind of hard to deal with if without the dams, because prismatic and fatal pushes aren't going to do anything against elementals. But our side deck is geared towards fighting that. Well, not geared towards fighting elementals, but we generally can side out bad cards against elementals and put in good cards. So this is, I would say, is a very good reason to play black in this deck, is Kaya's Guile. This card has won me quite a few games this format, namely because so many decks in my area, they're very graveyard eccentric, meaning they use Luris to recycle. They use Darcy to pump themselves up. Murktide, just stuff like that. And Kaya's Guile has really helped against those matchups. I would play 3 in the main, but I think 2's good. And Kaya's Guile on its own can kind of be a win con. You can just cast it and start poking opponents down with the token, or and whatnot. And it also gets rid of like big things like the sacrifice. So like it gets rid of stuff that are indestructible. Gets rid of elementals where we can't really easily remove it with prismatic or the fatal pushes. So yeah, Kaya's Guile really good. I definitely enjoy it at 2. And you'll see my side deck a little bit. It's kind of geared towards this being our win con here in a bit here. Still triple with the fairy. Opponent probably you can actually probably bump this up to 4. I have a fourth copy in my side deck. I think 3 for me is okay here. Sometimes against aggro decks, it's not that great because you bounce their like one mana, Darcy or something, and or Swiftfoot, and you still gotta deal with that thing later. So against aggro, it's not super great, but it's great against everything else in this format. It's great against uh, all the Living End decks, um, all the Cascade decks. Teferi's still really good Planeswalker to include. Um, but yeah, so one change I made was since I'm doing more of a draw goal style deck, definitely playing 4 Archmage Charms now. So with the way I've built my deck, have been able to consistently get this off, and able to actually play it, even though I'm playing 3 colors. So because of that, I think playing 4 copies is fine. You could play Esper Charm over the Archmage Charm, but Esper Charm has been kind of weak for me, I guess. I usually end up just using it to draw 2 cards. Not many enchantments that I need to remove. The only enchantment that I need to really remove is Blood Moon, but we have other ways of getting rid of Blood Moon. With Teferi or with the Prismatic Ending. Taking control of your opponent's stuff is pretty good too. The 1 mana stuff. So yeah, Archmage Charm, 4 copies. You could probably cut it down to 3, but I like it at 4. It's working well for me here. Card that you could probably cut out is Cryptic Command. It's not as powerful as it used to be. I still like it to answer some stuff, or to buy me time, really. So that's why I still play the Cryptic Commands. It's namely there to kind of clear the path for so that we can drop big Teferi. But yeah, I'm still only playing 2. I could probably even cut this down to 1, or even not play this at all, because it's very expensive to play in a format where most threats are like 1 or 2 mana, maybe even 3 mana. So at 4 mana, this thing needs to really, really get its value, and sometimes it doesn't get to that point. So could potentially cut this if you want to. Still 2/2 Jaces. I think you could probably cut the 1. I think I've probably mentioned that before, but I still like it. Still like seeing him. And the only time I really cut him from the deck is if you're playing against like Burn or something like that. Then yeah, you probably want to cut him out completely. And I'll kind of explain my side deck in a bit, and how I side, and what has done well for me. But in the control matchup, you can resolve him. He easily wins you the game. And him with Teferi is our win con. So you want to try to ult with Teferi, and then use Jace's ability to essentially minus your opponent's entire board. And I have had that done a few times, especially against other control matchup. I'll have a Jace on board, and I'll have a Teferi, and just those 2 alone will win you the control mirror, which has done really well for me. So yeah, I still think 2 Jaces is nice. Maybe just even the 1. Yeah, in terms of that, yeah, my biggest win con here is going to be the Teferis again, or the big Teferi. Yeah, I find 2 is good enough. 5 mana is still kind of expensive, but with the amount of draws and stuff we are playing in this deck, we should be able to see him and play him and resolve him. Sometimes I've resolved him twice. Sometimes I resolve him once and have another copy in hand and never needed to play the second copy. So yeah, I think 2 copies is good. You'll see it. 3 might get a little cloggy. I guess you could play 3 if you cut down on the Jace, or you cut down on something else. You could, or like the Cryptic Command, you could probably play 3 Teferis, but I like 2. Has worked pretty well for me. In terms of the mana base, not much has changed. I have my utility lands here. I do want to try out a Mystic Gates, but they're kind of expensive now, and I didn't pick it up when they were cheap, so I don't have Mystic Gates to try out. if I had Mystic Gates, I might try out Castle Arundel again. Um, just because Castle Vantress doesn't really do too much in terms of generating advantage. It helps you not flood out, but yeah, usually um, I would probably get more value with Castle Arundel rather than Vantress. But the problem with Arundel is that if you draw it and you keep it in your hand, and it's one of your like 3 lands in your opening hand, and you have an Archmage Charm, you might run into mana problems with Arundel. So that's the only reason why I'm playing Vantress over Arundel, is because as a utility land, this will allow me to still cast Archmage Charm without any real issue. Um, Rag, the Trinome for the 4th color, when you do need to remove stuff with the Prismatic Ending for 4. Uh, you could play another Trinome like the green one to get a 5th color, but oftentimes I don't think you really need that 5th color most of the time. If you really need that 5th color, then you're already in big trouble. Um, the one thing I do kind of want to try with this, since it's provides us red, is playing Alpine Moon in the side, because we almost always fetch for this like the first turn we can. If I have a fetch land on my opening hand, I'll almost always try to fetch this. One, to get the 5th color or the 4th color available, and obviously to not draw it, because if you draw this, it's kind of a dead card. Like, it comes in tap, it's kind of bad, and you don't really want to cycle this for 3 mana either. That's really expensive. So I almost always fetch this whenever I can to get out of the way to have it come in tap. Same thing with Colonnade. Colonnade is fine. Colonnade has actually won me a couple of games as being kind of like the push to essentially push for damage when I need to, and or in time, stuff like that. So yeah, Colonnade is has it's worth its price. Kind of expensive, but it's one of the better creature lands, I guess. I only play 2 lands that come in tap, because you really don't want too many lands that come in tap, because you do want your mana available all the time, as soon as possible. Yeah, still the 8 fetched lands. I'm thinking of probably removing the marshes for a 4th flooded strand. I don't have a 4th one right now, so whenever I pick up a 4th one, I could probably take this one out. This I was using in order to play Thoughtseize with and not hit myself for 5, I guess. So if you had a Thoughtseize in your hand, you go Marshes Flat into the swamp and then just Thoughtseize, and you just take 3 rather than 5 if you don't want to do Watery Graves or something like that. But since I'm not playing the Thoughtseize anymore, I think the 4th Flooded would probably do better than this. But yeah, it doesn't really make it barely makes a big difference, but yeah. 2 Wateries and 2 Hollow Fountains as my shocks. Took out the 3rd water because don't really need my black sources immediately, since I'm not playing Thoughtseize. Is still nice to have in case you're playing against aggro deck. You might want this early, so that you can enable your fatal pushes really early. But yeah, just don't think I need more than that much of shocks, or that much shocks here. Yeah, just check lands, just 2 checks. Probably could take this one out for a Mystic Gate if I ever get my hand on one. But yeah, right now the checks work fine. There's been like maybe 1 or 2 games where I would draw nothing but the checks and not actually have any of the named the island, the plains, or swamp to enable these. But that rarely happens. Maybe 1 game out of 20 that will happen. But yeah, I think 3 checks is fine. You're safe to play 3 or even 4 check lands, and they're cheap. Easy to pick up. Yeah, and just the 5 basics. I still think this is really invaluable. Played against like decks that played Fill the Runes, and this came in really handy against those decks, and obviously against Blood Moon. You want to fetch these as early as possible against Blood Moon. This deck hardcore loses to Blood Moon if you're not prepared for it. So yeah, in my meta, Blood Moon is something you gotta deal with, and I've been doing a lot better against Blood Moon decks with the five um, basics here. All right, so the main aspect of the deck that I've changed is the side deck and how I played, and this is entirely down to your local meta. My local meta, there's a lot of graveyard recursion decks. Not so much, I would say, Reanimator. I haven't really came across reanimation decks, but this side deck was definitely would be pretty strong against Reanimator. The main decks in my format are anything with Lurrus. Lurrus is a very popular companion. Urian, not so much, and Kahila only on elementals. Haven't seen any other Kahila Espers, but yeah, definitely elementals, Kahila, and just Lurrus. 2 mana, either Grixis Lurrus or Jund Lurrus, or even just Boris Burn Lurrus. I mean, every deck I played against at my locals has had Lurrus in it. Like almost like I would say a third to half of the players are playing Lurrus, and so my side deck is heavily geared to fighting Lurrus decks, to try to to beat them at their own game, I guess. Or Dredge decks. This deck is very strong against Dredge. I had almost always 2 old Dredge decks. They just can't answer the stuff that we play here. So Phoenix decks is the one I'm having a little difficulty dealing with, because sometimes, mainly it's probably because I wasn't drawing my side, or they're just a lot quicker, and sometimes they will kill us before we can stabilize. And so Phoenix, so against Boris Burn and Burn decks, I've done okay. I don't think I've lost against Burn, and I'll kind of show you my set deck and how I play against Burn. So Sanctifier is still really good. Good against Burn mono red decks, because you can leave this as a blocker. They can't really get rid of it. They rarely play anything that would get rid of a Sanctifier. Hits the lava darts, stuff like that. Play it against Phoenix. Get rid of the Phoenix. Phoenix doesn't have a way of getting rid of this. If they're playing the Phoenix version with the what's his face, the skull thingy, kind of forget what the skull thing is called. The 4 blue skull. You know what I mean if you play modern. Not so great against that version of the deck, but you can still hit a lot of their red mana spells. You kind of hit their graveyard a bit, and it still hurts them. On top of that, we're gonna reinforce it with the Rest in Peace. Rest in Peace is definitely a blowout. Rest in Peace, the only weakness I've came across is if they're playing white, there's a chance they're going to use their Prismatic Ending to remove the Rest in Peace. So that's the one thing that both Sanctifier and Rest in Peace is kind of weak against, is a kind of like a Prismatic Ending. So just be aware of that. But Rest in Peace, I think 2 is fine. The problem with playing 3 or more than 2 is that if you see more copies of this in your hand, it hurts. Like you draw this and you're like, oh crap, I drew another Rest in Peace, and so on and so forth. Especially when you're in the grind game. So I think 2 is fine. Because we're playing a lot of redundant graveyard removal, so don't really want to see more than one of these in the game. And if you see this early in the game, great. If you don't worry about it. Has a good chance of getting removed, but I think 2 is good here. It also hits our graveyard, so what I usually do when I'm siding is I would actually take out all my Snapcasters, and you'll see why. So there's games where I'll side out all 4 Snapcasters and put stuff like this in. So yeah. Veto for kind of like the control mirror, stuff like that. That's still pretty good. Yeah. You can either play Veto or Mystic Dispute, especially against the control mirror, against other blue decks. Veto is nice because that stops force of negation, stuff like that. If they try to force negation you, They can't obviously with veto, so that's the one thing veto is good against. Spreading Seas, I'm trying out too. Yeah, it's came in handy against Tron and a couple of other decks. Not so much Urza, because you kill Urza if they're playing Ren and 6. It kind of sucks because you'll kill the Urza and then they just Ren and 6 it back, and that has happened. But yeah, Spreading Seas still a decent card. It's great with Teferi. If you Spreading Seas it and you draw a card, you Teferi, you can bounce back the Spreading Seas, play the Spreading Seas again, and draw another card. So yeah, it's good card. I do want to try maybe Alpine Moon in the future instead of Spreading Seas, but we'll see. Yes, two Aether Gus, two or three. Um, yeah, not much to really say about the Aether Gus here. Just playing one Dispute here, because I got the Dovin's Veto for control mirrors, and overall my deck has been pretty good against any other control decks. Haven't really had any difficulties playing against them. I don't know why. Like I play against blue-white control, Izzet control, and other type of control decks, and I've done really well against them, and so I don't think I really need to side that heavily against other control mirrors. And here's kind of like just the last couple cards here. So, fourth copy of Teferi. Play this against controlled. You play it, or you side it in against other control decks, or you side it in against Cascade decks, stuff like that. So, the fourth copy of Teferi is in my side here. I'm playing the Japanese one, just so I remember to side this one out. So sometimes if you play 4 in the main deck and you kind of forget, you want to just be careful of that. Yeah. Kaya's Guiled and or just the Kaya package here. So this is what I essentially side in against the anti-graveyard hate. This entire package here. So since my meta is so heavy in the graveyard deck, I usually end up just siding something like this out. I'll side out that plus the snaps or something like that. So I would just take that out and just side this in, and Kaya would be my kind of like my win con here. So the main idea is just you're basically just gonna get rid of their graveyard. A lot of these cards are redundant, but that's fine because you need the redundancy, because graveyard decks, they do side hate against they'll side like Stony Silence, they'll side like other stuff. Obviously, if they're playing white, they'll do Prismatic Ending, stuff like that. They to kind of counterside you. But with this much redundancy, I've beaten a lot of those graveyard decks just because of this. Kaya's Guile is super versatile, great against burn, great against other graveyard decks, great against big creatures. Pretty much what main reason why I would play black in this deck on top of the fatal pushes, and that's why I think this version of deck is a little bit stronger compared to blue-white control. Granted, blue-white control, they can play Chalice and just kind of deny their opponent their game plan, but I don't have Chalices, and I don't really plan on playing Chalices because I still like playing my 1-mana cards, and I still like playing my 2-mana cards, and so I don't like playing Chalice because it limits your deck design a little bit, and so yeah, I just opt to play Esper versus playing the Chalice. Reason why I say the Kaya here is gonna be our main win con, because she heals us, and you can even uptick her even when there's no cards in the graveyard. And I've won by just ulting with her. So there's a few games where my opponent has maybe like 10 cards, 20 cards exiled, and it takes you 2 to 3 turns to get her to 5 loyalty, and you just ult with it with her and deal basically 10 to 20 damage and heal up basically. If you even if you don't kill him with this, obviously you still got your other Planeswalker as your win condition, but her with this kind of package makes her really strong. Like you just people underestimate Kaya. They kind of ignore her Especially when you have like a resting piece out and you have this, they don't realize they're being clocked by Kaya. Um, and yeah, so Kaya's like a 3 turn clock. They don't deal with her. If they're just trying to deal with damage to your face or stuff like that, or trying to close out the game, most of the time they'll forget Kaya is even on the board as she's actively clocking them down. Um, so I think Kaya's great. Her -1 ability is still really relevant. It's basically a prismatic ending. Still really good. Um, kind of like I guess she's kind of like a Teferi. So you're basically kind of playing almost like 6 Teferis in this deck with the Kaya. So yeah, I still really like her as a 3 mana Planeswalker, and especially in historic and um, in the other formats. I think she's just really good. Yeah, so that's kind of like my strategy lately, at least in my area or my locals, is to play a bunch of graveyard hate if they are playing that against control mirrors and big mana stuff. We got enough counter spells in our main deck, and we do fairly well against that. We have a lot of single target removal for low mana stuff. Um, only deck we might struggle against is something like maybe like Merfolk if they go crazy, or maybe like a Hammer Time, or like Taxon or Thalia deck or something like that, where they get off really early and really crazy. That's the one time we kind of struggle, but most of the time I've done pretty well. So which is pretty nice. Getting less land stuck, which is great. We have a lot of draw cards. We have a lot of answers, and just the way we side, I think, is done really well. The only card that I'm always been kind of iffy about are these right here, the Jace and the Cryptic Command. I honestly think they could down the Jace and maybe even just completely remove this and play like more Kaya or maybe Esper Charm instead. But I have them. I like their these pro tour promos, and so I decided to just keep it in my deck just for that. But yeah, that's kind of like my main strategy here, is to get this graveyard package hate out. Works against Lurrus decks, against Phoenix decks, against reanimated Esper, against living End, against Dredge. Yeah, and yeah, that's the main thing. That's the format right now, is getting value off of your grave, and this has really been super duper handy at kind of invalidating a lot of those strategies. Yeah, outside of that, I don't know if there's anything else I really want to talk about besides just a couple of changes in the lands, which I kind of mentioned earlier. Yeah, Mystic Gate, if you have that, you should probably play that. Yeah, play the 4 Flooded. Maybe cast an Arndale over Vantress. Maybe a 4 for 5th color if you want to play another Trinome. Maybe bring it up to 25 if you're running into a mana problem. You can even, if you're playing more cantrips, more draw cards, you could probably lower this down to 23 to 22 lands perhaps. But I think 24 is a safe bet, kind of in the middle of the road right there. Yeah, maybe less Archmage Charm if you're gonna go for more of a greedy build. Yeah, I think that's basically it. So just kind of hopefully a quick update. Well, not really quick. It's already kind of 30 minutes into the video, or into the video. So yeah, without any further ado, I hope you guys enjoy, and maybe in a month or two I'll give you guys another update on and see how this deck goes. Alright, see you guys.